Good morning, everyone. Welcome, councillors. Welcome to our executive leadership team and officers. Welcome, Councillor Burns. Councillors, we have a really interesting agenda today, broken up by, I guess, the need to go into closed session for a number of items there. So we'll do that currently in situ as the agenda sits at the moment. So for those officers that are watching that are, I suppose, relevant reportees to those individual items, if they can follow that, they'll make sure they're here for that, for those agenda items. Councillors, we have a meeting that we need to make at 10:30 in the gallery, just to look at what Ruth has prepared down there. So that'll be for half an hour at 10:30, and then today we'll get to lunch at 1. Councillors, so that's the writing instructions today. In terms of being present, we have an apology or a leave of absence from Councillor Megan Daniels for today's meeting. Would someone move her apology, please? Moved by Councillor Carpenter, seconded Councillor Curtis. Very good neighbours, you two, looking after Councillor Daniels. It's been moved and seconded. Councillors, all in favour? Against? Thank you, councillors. Any leave of absence is required going forward? I think Councillor Moriarty might have indicated that, yep.
The next council meeting, which I believe is the 6th of October, Mayor.
All right, thank you, Councillor Moriarty. All right, could someone move that leave of absence? Oh, sorry, Councillor Burns.
Yeah, I've got to ask for a leave of absence for the same meeting.
All right. All right. Well, we'll just test the market for you, Councillor Burns. We'll see if it extends to you. We'll do Councillor Moriarty's leave of absence first. So moved by Councillor Brimble-Combe, seconded Councillor Burns, that we grant leave of absence to Councillor Moriarty for the General Council meeting of the 6th of October. All in favour? Against? Thank you, councillors. Don't you vote against it, Councillor Moriarty. All right, Councillor Burns is also seeking a leave of absence, moved by Councillor Curtis, seconded Councillor Carpenter. All in favour? Oh, barely made a joke. Unanimously granted for the 6th of October. Thank you, councillors. Please don't anyone else leave or we won't get our quorum, so we'll work forward to that day. Thank you, everyone. Councillors, on all our behalves, I acknowledge the tradition of owners of the land on which we meet here today, and we pay our respects to their elders past, present, emerging. And I think this week, councillors, you may have seen a news story about certainly the Kayri people and the Kulinaringo site in the media, and I guess it's really important that communication between ourselves and our traditional owners continues to happen, as obviously there are some discussions around certainly sites that might be very important, not only to our traditional owners but certainly to all of our communities. So it's great to have that relationship, and any conversations about that will be between certainly the peoples of this area. Confirmations of our previous minutes, council, is our first agenda item. Is someone happy to move those, please? Moved by Councillor Moriarty, seconded Councillor Cypher. We'll just look at those, please, before we adopt them. If there's anything in there that you don't think is a fair reflection of those meeting minutes. All good? All right, councillors, they've been moved and seconded. All in favour? Against? Thank you, councillor. Carried. Any business arising out of those? And councillors, probably racing quickly on to that, if there is none, is that obviously there is some actions and updates there in your resolutions register. So sometimes you'll see that actions out of those minutes are actually recorded or captured in those updates. I think, council, it's a good practice to keep that list as short as possible, so we know that there's actually a good turnaround on obviously resolutions that come from those meeting agenda items, and they are there for you in those outstanding meeting actions. Is there any questions out of those? All good, thank you. And that upcoming agenda items, now we did actually talk about a couple yesterday that we're going to get into there, so we'll add those on. And obviously, councillors, if there are others, do it in the usual way. Contact your general managers, your CEO, or Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and we'll get those on that agenda list. Conflicts of interest, councillors, anything to declare today? Oh, good, we're getting trained well. All right, no petitions, Mr. COC.
Mr. Mayor.
Very good. Decision action reports, councillors. Let's move into the meat of our meeting, which in the first one comes certainly under the hand of our acting General Manager Communities, Lisa Donlan, and in relation to some planning matters. I'll let Lisa do the introductions. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to seek a resolution from Council in relation to a minor change for a development application for 35 Pritchard Road, which was approved by Council on 14 October 2021. I'll hand over to Kate Isles to discuss the planning aspects and conditions of the report.
Thank you, Lisa, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, it's a fairly minor change that is being asked for as part of this process. There has obviously been some extensive history with this particular site, and the reason why the report is coming back to you is that the matter has been previously decided by the council. Of note is probably figure 2 on page 16 of your report, where we've noted there where the issue with the condition sits at the moment. The current condition reads as if the extension to the road must be completed right to that point A on that particular figure, which is the eastern boundary of the property. What the intention of the condition was that the road was to be upgraded to that point B, which is the eastern driveway of the particular property. So in order to do that, the applicant has had to seek a minor change to condition 2.3 of the approval, and that will also give rise to the effect of the operational works application that has come before council as well. So councillors, it is just a change to that particular condition. We have assessed that application and we have determined that it is a minor change in accordance with the Planning Act, meaning it has not resulted in substantially different development, and that assessment is outlined in the report as well. Happy to take any questions, councillors.
Thank you, Kate. For clarification, the original approval, was it through the court or just a negotiated decision? This doesn't have to go back through the court?
No, that's correct,
okay, thank
Mr.
you.
Mayor. Yep.
Councillors, any other questions? It's a loose term, east, isn't it, when you start talking east? Everything turns on a word, I understand that, but certainly point A and point B is certainly way more a better reference. So,
yes.
Councillors, I know there's a lot of report there for probably a very small change, but if there is any other questions, the recommendation is that we approve the minor change referenced by that number for a material change of use, proposing an extension of a short-term accommodation. The second part of that is to issue a development approval with the following amendment to the conditions of approval. So you're going to replace existing condition 2.9 with the following condition that obviously better quantifies and delineates where that point would be. And then part 3 of that is obviously all the conditions that were contained in the original development application approval follow. So is someone happy to move that? Moved by Councillor Burns, seconded Councillor Brimblecombe. All in favour? Against? Thank you, councillors. Carried. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Kirsten. All right, councillor, 11.1.2 is the adoption of charges resolution number 14. Sounds almost like a train station, but same officers, same department. Thank you, Lisa, if you'll do those introductions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to seek a resolution from Council in relation to a proposed change to Charges Resolution number 14. You may recall councillors were briefed on this matter during a strategic and briefing forum on Tuesday, 29th June 2021. Since then, the team have undertaken stakeholder engagement and finalised the draft charges resolution in accordance with the direction from councillors. I'll again hand over to Kate Isles to discuss the detail of the report. Note we have Stuart Pendland online also.
Thank you, Lisa, and through you again, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, this increase in the charges has...
No, he's online.
Literally, yeah.
Thank you.
No, you're right. So councillors, the key thing here is that, as we've said, that this has actually come to council before. It was noted as part of a benchmarking exercise that Central Highlands Regional Council was one of the lowest in terms of its charges across the entire state. Even with these changes, which is really only 3 changes as outlined on page 21 of the report, we will still remain one of the most affordable local governments in Queensland. Those increase in charges relate to subdivisions, so where we are creating new allotments, that will increase from $20,200 per lot up to $25,000 per lot in both the full service and the partial service catchments. We'll also look to increase the adopted charge for non-residential development in $1 per square metre across commercial bulk goods, commercial office, education facility, entertainment, indoor sport and recreation. And the third increase is to propose the adopted charge for non-residential in both full service and partial catchments, where at the moment council does not charge infrastructure charges, and we are proposing a small increase for the high impact rural and also for essential services. As I said, council will still remain one of the most affordable local governments in Queensland, and importantly, councillors, if you do agree to adopt the new resolution number 14, it will not come into effect until the 1st of January next year. That gives at least 3 months headway for those who are looking to lodge their applications and have them decided before the 1st of January, that they will benefit from the current charges resolution, being resolution number 13. So anything decided post 1st of January will come under this new resolution. So it's a great way for others to get their applications in and decided before this increase would come into effect. Again, councillor is happy to take any questions.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Kate. Councillors, any questions? Councillor Moriarty?
Yeah. Just quickly, how long does it take for the applications to be decided?
Sure. Through you, Mr Chair, Councillor Moriarty, it depends on the type of application. So we have what's known as accepted development subject to requirements, which is quite an easy application. Generally speaking, that would be turned around in about 10 business days. A code accessible application will be generally turned around within about 40 days, and an impact application could take up to 3 months to 6 months, and it will also depend on whether that application requires referral to the state agency, which is then out of council's hand. So in most cases we can try and streamline applications. So if there was an impact application that was to come in today, it is likely that they might be able to be decided before this came into effect, but we'd have to see those applications lodged reasonably quickly.
So it probably would be better if it was, 12 months rather than to the 1st of January to, like if you are going to quickly lodge, then there's no guarantee it's going to be decided, because that's what when I read it, I thought it was lodged, sorry. Yep. Now I've just realised it's actually approved.
Yes.
So I think there's some advantage lost there. So what I'm thinking is, what I was thinking as well was if there was an option to extend that out to 12 months to give developers or others a bit more time and improve time to do your communications and engage as well, just to let people know about our new whatever.
If I can add in there, through you, Mr Mayor, during the stakeholder consultation that we undertook with peak industry bodies, we discussed that time frame in terms of the 1st of January effective date, and there was no concern in terms of the changes. There was actually quite a lot of support from the industry groups, and that's within the report, about why we need to increase those charges. So I don't see it as being a risk in terms of having that effective date as being 1st of January. We also, this financial year in the operational plan, put in measures, key performance indicators within the operational plan to reduce our development assessment timeframes as well too. So the team are aware that they've got to comply with the 100% target that we have in that operational plan. So while there might be a push for applications, those types of uses that are increasing, we haven't really seen a great number of those types of applications over the last 12 months anyway. So yeah, there is that. And I guess it incentivises the applicants to make properly made applications. So if they do the right thing, provide all of the right information, negating the need for an information request or respond quickly, it's their incentive as an applicant-driven process to provide us with the best quality application so that it can be turned around within that before the 1st of January.
Thank you.
All right. Councillor Rolfe?
So you've partly answered my question, but also is there any way that council can do a whatever sort of increase of your charges periodically, so instead of going and saying, oh heck, we've got to have this 68% rise in the fees and charges? Well, they're not big changes, but a 68% rise in a fee looks big, doesn't it? So apart from having this big jump now, is there any way going forward of having CPI increase or cost, whatever? Thanks.
Again, through you, Mr Mayor, the Councillor Rolfe, at any point in time there will be a CPI increase and a PPI index as per the regulation. So once a infrastructure charges notice is issued, it may actually not be paid for 4 years. At that point, the PPI increase would come into place. But certainly I don't disagree in terms of more regular review of the charges and that benchmarking exercise. I still think even at the $25,000 per lot and what came through the consultation was that still is quite easily still one of the lowest in Queensland. Our neighbouring councils are charging the full adopted charge by the regulation, which is more up to $32,000. So I think there is definitely a process to go through to review this more regularly, and that might be at the same time our LGIP is reviewed to relook at those resolutions more regularly as well.
I think in terms of certainly in reference to Kate's last comment there about the LGIP, I mean, clearly if you look at our call on infrastructure, certainly water and wastewater infrastructure, you would argue that perhaps that our infrastructure charges prior to now have not been really covering, I guess you'd say, the network cost of the upgrades that are required, and that's a little bit the misnomer we have in this cash position that, well, when I say cash position, cash and constrained reserves around those improvements that LGIP usually absorb, but in probably hindsight, they should have been a little bit higher in the past when there was probably conditions were, I guess you'd say, conducive to a lot of activity. This is a catch-up, but it would be seen that certainly our infrastructure charges were still really I think on the attractive end of, I guess you'd say, a developer scale than on the high side. So I'm not really interested in so far as really making sure that I keep developers, all of them, happy, but certainly from our perspective, making sure that our community doesn't wear that cost of deficits in infrastructure going forward. And as you know, we have been through the experience of, a $30 million water treatment plant upgrade and a $22 million wastewater upgrade. So we are inherently and fundamentally aware of the costs of what infrastructure in regions will cost. I know Kate does say in this report this is a little emerald-centric, I guess, in some way, shape or form, but they're the costs, and I guess the argument would be that they go a long way towards, I guess you'd say, nominally recognise the LGIP demands right now, but over time there is that sort of chance that gap increases or we don't cover those costs. And so I guess this movement, and I fully concur with Kate and Kirsten in that I think our communication certainly with our customers and certainly those in industry would say that they're very much at the low end. So I'm not concerned that they would put us at a disadvantage, but bearing in mind that it's still attractive, and certainly with the READY program and other incentives that we might be considering, it's still an attractive place if the market conditions are conducive to further development. I think even this week, I think the stuff at John Coyle is coming into the organisation, or has been in the organisation, to refresh a currency on a significant residential area, certainly on our south side. So there is certainly some interest in obviously refreshing that. So, Councillor Moriarty.
Thank you. That was one of my concerns. I thought that some of these points here from the external sessions were really interesting, and I did notice the Emerald-centric one, and I was a little bit worried about, or concerned, I should say, concerned about the comment about being Emerald-centric, and it made me realise that, of course, this is across the region, and I was worried, you know, it is, or concerned, that with, again, Emerald might be big enough to support the increased charges, but would that be deterrent of some of developments in some of our smaller communities? So I was a little bit concerned about that. The other thing was, I thought point 1 was very interesting, providing clarity that the scope of the review and benchmarking analysis was focused on infrastructure charges, and particularly that calculation methodology, because I was thinking the thing that was probably missing for me, which I didn't think to ask about, was how many developments, particularly in that the first group, would the increase in new residential allotment, over the 15 years, what would sort of be, do you think, would be the, sorry to put you on the spot, medium sort of growth rate over that time? If, you know, like you were saying, none probably last 12 months, but if I've got that right, but potentially a development coming now? What do you think? Only because I was trying to gather, understand it would be an enormous amount. So what my thinking was, there would be an enormous amount of infrastructure charges, and I was trying to gauge how much that increase would actually contribute to that. Like, would it be significant? Would it not be? And I was trying to do some little calculations, and I wasn't sure it was that significant, particularly looking at some of our other communities that incentive might be lost through increases.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I can, Councillor Moriarty, I think on average at the moment, a lot of our applications that we're currently assessing are not necessarily the creation of new allotments. We have a lot of boundary realignments that we're seeing. They still trigger an application, but they don't trigger a charge. So the charge is only where there is an additional allotment, and so if it's a 1 into 2 allotment, the additional charge only goes up to the 25,000, so you only get charged for the additional lot. So you get essentially a credit because you've got an existing vacant lot, so you're credited the 25,000 for that, and then you're only charged the 25,000 for the new lot, because it's all about the additional demand on the network. In the main, I would suggest that based on the total cost of a development of a lot, that near 5,000 increase is still palatable, given the rise that we've also seen in the sale rate of land as well. So if one's going up, the other one needs to go up as well, because at the moment council isn't benefiting from the rise of the residential value that's actually coming through. And that's not just Emerald-centric, that's across the region more broadly. So the developer may benefit from the higher rate of sale, but council's not benefiting from the fact that it has to service that additional lot as well. Yeah. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. But the other end of that equation too is the potential that you've got extra ratepayers that are going to pay some of that off in another way, not just the upfront, but also going forward. The other one was I actually did think that, you know, with a 25% increase and 60% increase in charges that are there, going to be there that weren't there. I was actually thinking along the same lines, I think, as Councillor Rolfe, if there was some way over 3 years there could be or some sort of time frame to do this incrementally. I'm just mindful of our ability to look like we're working with the developers and also giving that time to work with developers and get the communication out there to meet developers halfway. Look, I understand, you know, the charges have to be reviewed and looked at for sure, but and the other thing I was concerned about was it's sort of the timing, given that we've just been through the infrastructure recovery project. I just felt that even prolonging it a little bit, even that 12 months rather than the 1st of January, will give us time to work with people. That's basically my comments.
Again, through you, Mr Mayor, if I can, Councillor Moriarty, my personal view would be that the 1st of January sets a nice target for a new calendar year. I think it's really important that going through this process, the vast majority of applications we do get are code accessible and that they would be able to be decided before this came into effect. I think there's a clear communication back to the development community, which has happened in that consultation, that they're not saying to us that this is going to deter development from occurring. We've seen a great level of rise, and we've even had inquiries as of this morning for new residential subdivisions coming back into the area, which is fantastic. But I think the other important component here is particularly those uses where we're looking to see a rise. Most of those would actually qualify for the READY application in any event. So separate to this, those applications could come through under the READY, and those applications would benefit under the READY from that new charges. So they would benefit from the waiver of the charges as per the new rate. So particularly things around education facilities, office components, where they're meeting that READY policy, they're going to benefit from, yes, they've been given an infrastructure charge, but they could come back to council under that READY policy, come back to council and get those charges waived at the same time.
Yeah, I still have concerns about that, and I think it just needs to be also made clear that the READY, the $250,000 a year, not every developer can access that, but they can, as much as they can. But that actually comes out of the general fund. It doesn't come out of the reserves that the development payments are going to. I think that has to be very clear. And that incentive is great. I noted that one, but I still have concerns with the time frame, and I still have concerns with education being charged as well. So that's my comments. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions, councillors? All right. Well, councillors, the recommendation is there. So that is the adoption of charges resolution number 14. Which obviously supersedes charges resolution number 13, which is referred to in the second part of that resolution, which will remain in effect till 11:59, 31 December this year. So obviously the start being 1 January 2022. Someone happy to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Curtis, seconded. Councillor Burns, all in favour? Against? What's that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 to 2. I think that's recorded and carried. Sorry, did you want to say something?
I was going to say, I don't want my name's up there.
Do you want to record your name? Okay. Councillor Burns? Yep. All right. Okay, councillors, next agenda item is the adoption of the Central Highlands Regional Council All Highlands Risk Assessment 2021. I see Glenn Bell had walked into the room. Well, I know why you got to be acting general manager, Lisa. I think you've got nearly all the reports, so someone was smart there. So, Lisa, if you could do the introductions, please, on this all hazard risk assessment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The purpose of this report, councillors, is to seek the adoption of the hazards risk assessment. Glenn Bell will be addressing the report and providing a brief presentation for you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Mr Chair and councillors.
Just might move your microphone a little bit closer towards you, Glenn. Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Councillors, through the Chair, it gives me great pleasure to deliver Council's all hazard risk assessment. This assessment is taken 2 years to finalise. We put the first assessment through in 2020 with a number of gaps. Those gaps have now been identified and rectified. So it's been quite a long process to manage the all hazards risk management study to ensure that we are in line with the Queensland risk management framework along with the national standards. So this is probably the first time in a number of years we're actually fully compliant with both state and national standards. So it's a great outcome to get to that point. The study itself introduced the Queensland risk management framework, detailing its hazards, and these were all assessed by a group through CHRC and stakeholders. It provides background information on the legislative context of risk assessment process and relevant acts at this stage, and the QERMF implementation within Central Highlands Regional Council. I'm not going to go through all the acts that are there, but there's certainly a lot behind it all, and I thank very much those councillors that have attended the risk management training of recent times to provide some background into emergency risk management rather than standard risk management. There is a difference. The process itself provides a definition of each of the identified hazards. They are scenario-based. And on an annual cyclical nature. The risks assessed process is detailed, including the exposed elements, information and resources used, scoring assumptions applied, and inherent and residual risk scoring. That's important when we talk about our current inherent risks and the residual risks. Those risks that Council itself are unable to provide mitigation options for and are required to put forward to district and state to provide support in further mitigation options or response capabilities. Very, very important in that line, and this is probably the first time we've actually identified all of those residual risks. The hazards that we identified through here, now at state level there's about 19 hazards. We certainly defined those down depending on our area. A lot of those are coastal inundation and so forth, which do not represent the Central Highlands. So we've nailed it down to these, which is the severe tropical cyclone, and that's a 3 to 5. Severe thunderstorm events, which are becoming more relevant. Bushfires, once again, our current climate is causing more intense bushfires. Earthquakes of a magnitude 5.35, similar to Newcastle. Heat wave, pandemic, epidemic, exotic animal disease, plant disease, major accident, air, road, rail, transport, urban fire and hazardous materials, and terrorism and cyber security are the key areas that we've covered in this. Any questions so far?
Well, you've frightened the hell out of us so far, but I mean...
Sorry?
You've frightened the hell out of us so far, but no.
Yeah, no, well, look, it is an interesting challenge, risk management, when we look at everything that's there. And this is a very complex slide, this one. It's just to give you an indication. The last one you would have seen 12 months ago had a lot of little red sections in it. Those red sections are extremely high. They are areas that we do not have appropriate mitigation options in place for or planning in place for. In particular, the last year pandemic was one of the key areas. That has now, whilst it's still a risk to our community, has reduced dramatically due to the planning at Commonwealth, state and in particular at local level. So those plans that are in place have reduced the risk. Doesn't mean it's not there, it means that we've reduced the risk. So looking at that, we are certainly coming a long way with our risk planning. It's more the colour codes I wanted to show you there. The red is disappearing. It's reducing our risk. That means we have plans in place or mitigation options in place, or we have identified those risks and transferred them to district and state to provide support to us. The residual risk score itself is, out of that, we spoke about the pandemic. It has shown a reduction, and that is due to the planning and preparation that's gone in place since COVID-19. Heat wave has resulted in extreme risk being identified. And when we talk about the heat wave risk scores are considerably higher than risk assessments undertaken in 2019, it's been elevated by the state heat wave risk assessment based on climate change models and predictions showing effective worsening in the next decade or so. So that's something that we need to really seriously look at in our planning in how we are going to manage that. It's not just in the matter of the heat itself. Whilst that kills more people have perished in heat waves than in other hazards combined, it's actually going to be our work practices, our capability to manage our infrastructure. Heat affects our technologies, the types of road materials that are used. If you look at, I think it was 2 years ago, the road materials that were put in the far northwest of Queensland, they put them down and then they melted straight away afterwards. A significant disruption to the community and cost to the community. So they are the types of things that we now need to look at very seriously, is how we look at all of our infrastructure, our planning, our procedures, our staff management in extreme heat. All of that will be part of the risk assessment going forward. Key issues to come out of this, and this won't be a surprise to you. Further work is required at all levels to identify actual mass evacuation capability at local, district and state levels. Whilst we have done a lot of work at a local level, mass evacuation still becomes one of our major issues. It is estimated we have the capacity for short term to manage about 1,000 people within the Central Highlands. And that's stretching the issue. If we have to do a mass evacuation, then we will have to require district and state to step up and provide that support to us. Now, in the last 10 years since I've been here, we have now written to the state government through the district 4 times to request information back from them on planning for mass evacuation. To date, we have not received an appropriate reply. Further assess the existence and effectiveness of measures and controls in place to manage identified hazards. And in particular, when you look at that with heat wave in mind, is the water security issue, is further assess that and look at how we better manage our water security into the future, and the other hazards, bushfire management. The old strategy of undertaking hazard reduction burns is still a strategy that's used today. What we are finding more and more out of the findings from the 2018-19 fires in particular is that the general public are very concerned about smoke hazard with regards to their health. So when we talk about undertaking hazard reduction burns, there needs to be better community communications and better understanding within the community of why they need to be done, how they need to be done, and when are the best times to do them. It could be that we go into mechanical means rather than burning in the future. There are ramifications to all of those types of actions, including the cost to the community and the capability of undertaking those hazard reduction activities. Further assess the existence and effective measures, done that one, sorry. Refine the residual risk scores and prioritise them. So we have a number of residual risk scores that are there. The residual risk is those that we do not currently have the capacity for or the capability to undertake. So those scores need to be refined down and then looked at very carefully to see if there is a need to refer those to district and state, what parts of it need to be referred to district and state, and then actually document those so that we have findings coming back to this group to say that they have actions in place. Not that we've just identified them, passed them on and said we've transferred the risk, it's not our problem anymore. Well, it is still our problem because until there's an action in place, we do not have those issues rectified. Achieve agreement on the above with the local disaster management group. That was done at our last meeting, Mr. Chair. This study, and its records have been endorsed by the Local Disaster Management Group. Initiate and develop business cases for key actions, so we've got to work through the actions now and identify additional business cases that would need to come through to Council for consideration for future mitigation opportunities. Articulate the major risks being transferred to state and district, and build business cases for state funding and actions where most needed. And that's probably the key in this. This provides us now a platform to provide evidence back to the state and Commonwealth for future funding options. There are certain things that are what we call low-hanging fruit that we can take care of locally with minor funding. But a lot of this is quite intense funding that we'll need to look at, and particularly when you talk about infrastructure mitigation. How do we better manage our infrastructure? A lot of that is very, very expensive. The only way that we're actually going to get funding for that is appropriate is through state and Commonwealth agencies. And that needs this evidence to go through. And look, we do this anyway, but pursue innovative approaches to emergency planning, response and recovery. I believe that Council here has always been on the front foot in that line, and we've looked outside the box in the past, and we continue to look outside the box in the future to look at our community safety in general. That's the presentation, Mr. Chair. If there's any questions on that, I'd just like to make one final comment. I'd like to thank all of those that are here that have been involved in the process over the last 2 years. It has taken a long time, including our infrastructure people who, water and sewer, we've sat down with and done risk assessments with, our planning departments, our councillors. It has been an enormous project to get to this point, but it is very, very pleasing to be able to deliver it to you.
Thanks, Glenn. Can I just probably ask a question in relation to probably what would be, you know, a contributing part of the risk, and probably it's just around evacuation, particularly probably for flooding again. Where are we up to with the business case for the Vince Lester and those sorts of things? Like, because I guess that's a risk still in terms of evacuation.
It is.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our report will be brought to Council next round strategy meeting on the draft business case for the Vince Lester upgrade.
Because I figure that somewhere along the line, and guessing clear and present danger, I'm not sort of trying to prioritise what the all hazards might manifest themselves. Anything can happen after you gave us that big scary list, but the reality would be that, you know, the community would feel sort of, I suppose, always inherently we're potentially flood prone. You know, those sorts of, you know, we've got the planning committee for the evacuation planning.
That's correct. If I could just, I can add a bit to that. We have now formed what we're calling a steering committee for evacuation planning, with the priority now being set on Emerald, Rubyvale and Sapphire. That group will now meet on the 14th of October to set the strategic direction and outcomes required for the evacuation planning. So that's that funding from our Commonwealth partners with regards to disaster resilience and co-funded with Council. So that's a 2-year program. We are hoping to have the draft finalised for Emerald, Rubyvale and Sapphire, if not finished, by 30 June, and all other communities finished by June 2023.
Okay, all right. I'm just mindful, I know last, you know, the Queensland Region QRA, there's funding, resilience funding that comes out. I think the last one's only about $19 million. When I say only, I mean that's still a good contribution, but I mean, I guess in terms of the remedies or the opportunities for us to apply for those, you know, a good clear all hazards risk should plug in with, I suppose, some priorities that we have about, you know, improving some things, that it might be bridges and plans and, you know, like the solution that Bill and others brought to our previous meetings in around Bluff. But those sorts of things should be able to guide and underpin, I suppose, our applications going forward. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. Look, the key to this is if we've got the evidence base behind our applications, we will be looked at very favourably at all levels of government. If we are just making an assumption and trying to put forward funding applications, we'll be very lucky to get through. The one thing I can say on that is there is about 5% of disaster funding goes to mitigation at the moment at a Commonwealth level. The rest is currently on response capability and recovery. The planning at the Commonwealth and state level is to increase dramatically the mitigation monies that come forward and reduce dramatically the response monies that are being utilised. So in the next few years, you will see more and more funding opportunities come forward for mitigation options. This just gives us a very good platform to provide the evidence base for that.
Thanks. Councillor Rolfe.
So, thanks, Mayor. So going on from the mitigation of flooding and evacuation and even fire emergency in the smaller communities that have low-lying areas running through them, and we all know about Bluff and we all know about Springshaw. How do we, as through infrastructure, your infrastructure mitigation and the perceived environmental impact of cleaning out streams and trees out of creeks right near bridges and this sort of thing. Have you gone through in your emergency risks and as a mitigation plan for the cleaning out of that sort of stuff?
Through you, Mr Mayor, on a case-by-case basis this is. Emerald has already done all that planning in place with a number of consultants, so I'm not going to go into there. We are just finalising the details to get the full modelling done of Rubyvale. As the community has requested there that they understand that the risk is the build-up of silt materials and timber in their creek system. The only way that we can do that is to actually model the system, do some on-ground surveying, and then finalise the details of that into flood modelling to see whether or not that is a risk to the community, or is it going to have any potential benefit. Now, the one thing we've got to understand with creeks is a lot of the timber that's in the small creeks is down the bottom. It's 10% of the volume. As soon as you get out wider, it makes no difference at all to the flood levels. So we've just got to make sure that we articulate and we ensure that we've consulted with each of those communities, that they're aware that we've done this, we've done the modelling, we've done all the options there, and then come back with an option to them to provide what mitigation needs to go forward.
So in Springshaw it has been suggested to build a levee bank around the wool shed there. So this is where we need to be able to model all of these things, Glenn, so that we can go to our communities and say, this is what we've modelled, this is how it works. And if you notice, Jenny, infrastructure, that a creek is now starting to change. It will change direction because it has trees, gum trees, in the bottom of the creek growing quite big. So, I mean, we have to do things before it gets to a stage where it floods again, which it's only a few years since it did.
Yeah.
And yeah.
If I can just come into that, that one particularly hasn't been raised with me as a mitigation option for Springshaw. Our highest risk communities certainly are being prioritised at this stage. Some of the problems that we have with the options that come forward is every one of these options has high cost to running the modelling. So we would, as a council, have to accept that if we are going to run these models, there would be additional budget required to look at all of these mitigation options on an individual basis and a risk basis. So what is the risk to the community? What is the outcomes that are required? And then on a priority basis, what could we take forward? It's not to say no to anything, it's a matter of looking at what is the community's priority in general over the region.
Councillor Moriarty, I think
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Congratulations to the team and everyone involved. Having the all hazards risk assessment for 2021. As you said, looking at all of those residual risks and even just leading on from conversations that we're having, looking at evacuation routes, looking at, what sort of potential clearing might be done in waterways. There's a lot of other agencies that we have to work with, and we can't do it without our evidence, which is congratulations to this council on how much work that they've done in that space, which is really in, how do we move to mitigation. So as you're saying, with the funding going forward, our council is in a better spot now to have that evidence-based approach to mitigation. But again, a lot of it relies on state government agencies like Natural Resources or whoever to approve any clearing in waterways or main roads for upgrades to infrastructure. But the other thing I just wanted to ask, and also say that even by having this all hazards risk assessment and knowing that that's there, and that is mapped back to all of the different types of planning that's done from, community and, with human and social recovery plans or communication plans, all those are all mapped through. So if there's, I think having the risk assessment done, if there's slippage in any area, this is a great document to fall back on as well. So I just think this is amazing how far our council's got and all the evidence it has. The other thing with evacuation, it's not just the routes to evacuate people, particularly mass evacuation, it's also the centres, how they're set up, how they're run as well. So I'm sure that that's all definitely part of everything that you've got ahead. But I just, wanted to make sure that those evacuation centres in some of our smaller communities are also, part of the planning.
Thank you, Councillor Moriarty. Through you, Mr Chair. Those centres have been reviewed this year, so we've actually taken a couple out of our evacuation centres, and one of those is the Duringa CWA Hall. It's no longer capable of being undertaken for that. We've always got our ears open and eyes open for additional centres, so we have about 54 classified centres within the region, and that's right through to Arcadia Valley everywhere. And we've audited all of those centres to identify what they have within them, how we access them, who's got the keys, who are the contacts. Each of the centres will need to have some sort of classification put on them, whether they're a primary centre, which has all of the capabilities, a secondary centre which has some capabilities, or a last resort centre which basically gives you a small hall in the middle of nowhere that has nothing but it gives them a roof. Those need to be identified, and they have been identified. As part of this evacuation planning, we will also review once again their access egress, and that'll upgrade that capability again. So we'll know in flood situations where to send people and where not to, clearly. Not that we don't have that now, but we'll have better modelling that can provide that detail. So yes, the evacuation centres are high on the priority. Capability of managing the centres is a challenge. It takes a lot of staff to look at a centre, and that continues to be a challenge. We do have the training there, we do have the manuals there, but we still got to have the people on the ground. And that will be a challenge as the day arises.
And I just, as we speak, just to keep frightening you, that there's been an earthquake in rural Victoria this morning as we speak. So, so there you go. So it can happen, and obviously that's further validation of why every region should have obviously an all hazards risk assessment register. Well, councillors, that recommendation is there that we endorse that. The Central Highlands Regional Council all hazards risk assessment. I think Glenn said it has been to the LDMG.
That's correct.
I wasn't here for that meeting, but certainly Chair Christine, I think, looked after that. It's there for endorsement, so I'm happy to move that. Moved by Councillor Moriarty, seconded Councillor Brimblecombe. All in favour? Against? I'm going to count you 4 carried. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Glenn. And I know sometimes it's only 15 minutes that we actually deal with the decision here, but as Councillor Moriarty was saying, there's a lot of work over a lot of period of time. And can I just thank you? And I know that I know Mike Lolbeck in LGAQ, looking at doing his further degree, is using this region as a bit of an example of how you do disaster management, and not that's the specific topic of his study, but certainly they look to us as a good example of how it works. So very much appreciate it.
Can I just add, I'd like to thank Bill Wilkinson and Keith Jarrett for the input into this. Their input is critical, their knowledge was critical to get this document off the ground. And I know they're busy doing other things, so over the last 12 months in particular, they have provided an enormous amount of support to me in this.
Thanks very much, Glenn. Thank you. All right, councillors, we'll give communities a bit of a break there. We move on to our 11.2, which is corporate services under Acting GM Scott Greensall. He's going to introduce our monthly financial report. I know Vicky is here. Thank you. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This report presents the Council the monthly financial report for the period through to the 31st of August for Council's consideration and adoption. I'll hand over to Vicky Coleman, the Manager of Finance, to present it.
Thank you, GM Grinsell. Good morning, Mr Mayor, and good morning, councillors. Through the Chair, I present the August Finance Report. The purpose of this report is to provide a monthly update on Council's overall finance position in accordance with the local government regulation. It provides a snapshot of Council's financial position and performance to date for the period ending 31 August 2021. The key focus of this report is to detail key variances to budget and highlight additional information of interest by Council. The report is divided into 6 key components, being the 3 key financial statements on the performance of core council operations, an analysis of capital works program, the business unit results, and a summary of procurement activities, which includes local buy information. The Statement of Comprehensive Income is provided at Attachment 1 and details income and expenses reported during the period. The August result was an operating surplus of $280,000, reported against a budgeted deficit of $341,000, a favourable variance of $621,000. A year-to-date net result, including capital, is a surplus of $3.2 million against a budgeted surplus of $2.8 million, a favourable variance of $397,000. Key variances are due to the following: the timing of funding paid to Central Highlands Development Corporation, grant funding received earlier than anticipated, financial assistance grants not being received as anticipated in the budget timing, materials and services over budget, internal plant hire over budget, and RPC revenue net of expenses under budget of $1.3 million. The capital program actual expenditure to 31 August is $5.6 million against a full year budget of $59.9 million, representing a year-to-date spend of 9.39%. Also presented in the report are the operating and income expenses and financial position of the 3 business units. The airport has recorded an actual operating surplus of $384,000 against a budgeted surplus of $229,000. This is largely due to increases in revenue. The sales yard unit has recorded an actual operating surplus of $75,000 versus a budgeted deficit of $2,000. This is due to additional revenue generated by increased activity. The waste unit has recorded an actual operating surplus of $144,000 against a budgeted surplus of $275,000. This variance is largely due to the phasing of materials and services in the budget. The water unit has recorded an actual operating surplus of $615,000 against a budgeted surplus of $899,000. This variance is largely due to phasing of materials and services within the budget. Local buy statistics are also included, which show a year-to-date local spend of $8.63 million, representing a 31% spend rate. Council's cash position at 31 August is $68.4 million. Rates and water receivables are currently at 14.6 million, with council's debt collection activities resuming in September. That concludes the presentation of the August Finance Report. I'm happy to take any questions on the information provided.
Thanks, Vicky, and it's a lot in that report. I just wanted, mainly for councillors' clarification, just the phasing, as you said, of the FAGS grants and those financial assistance grants, I shouldn't use acronyms, just how they work and how they're difficult to, sometimes how they come in early and sometimes they go late. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. So we anticipate what the timing will be on many of these government grants and payment processes, and they don't always turn out to be that exact time. So when we refer to phasing, it simply means that we budgeted for a particular period and the payment generally has not come in within that period. If it was revenue that we foregone or underachieved, then we wouldn't report that as a phasing variance, but it can be quite challenging to get the timing right on government payments.
I think, Vicky, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. It was just more a case of it's almost impossible to know, and it is basically impossible to know when that's likely to be. But in some cases, you're relying on historical efforts in respect of the payments of the financial assistance grants, and then other times, for whatever reason, it changed. And I think that changed on us about 3 years ago. It came in early, which obviously didn't compromise the budget that we had in draft and completing, but certainly the one that we were projecting forward, it certainly had an implication there, so it is quite difficult. But councillors, yeah, other questions? Councillor Moriarty, yeah.
Probably not so much a question, but just a comment to say thank you. It was good to see the procurement activities included in there. It sort of helps you sort of understand which projects are moving ahead, and that local spend as well. So thank you.
Can I just ask on the, as well, Vicky, just in relation to the outstanding amounts, I guess no one wants to be so insensitive as to not talk about, obviously, an appropriate period of time, but I mean, I guess that $14 million is it getting to a high number? Is that only because of timing, or is in this instance?
Yes, Mr Mayor. So we had some delayed payment terms that council agreed to in previous rate runs, but also because the challenges that we have faced within getting the rates done in the particular set timing. So it's quite important, the timing of those reminder and arrears notices when they go out. So we need to allow for the particular payment periods to expire. So because we're able to get in now on the water rates before they're reissued again, and so the arrears notices can be run on the balances that are currently outstanding, but we're not in a position to issue it on the general rates because we're issuing, in fact, this week, and we're going into a payment period term of 30 days. So we actually need that payment period to expire before we can begin following up on the arrears and starting any formal processes. So yes, as the Mayor indicated, the balances are high, and they are where they are for a number of reasons, one of them being previous extended payment periods, and also because of the challenges in issuing the rates, but we have that under control in the next couple of months.
Thanks, Vicky. Councillor Roll.
Through you, Mayor, to Vicky, in the procurement activities, what is your opinion on the payments to government agencies being larger than at this stage, larger than the top 5 companies outside spend? So is it a fact of the times we're in where we're not able to procure outside companies, or is it just government funding?
I think it's a combination of a couple of things, as you mentioned, those sorts of things, but also we do find that there's a big push in getting invoices through for the end of financial year, and traditionally July and August is a bit of a lag for the local spends to come through and be processed. And also I don't think we're seeing quite the uptake in local companies in the tender bids as well, so all of that's sort of playing out.
All right, thanks. Councillors, other questions? Well, good. No, once again, Vicky, very comprehensive. that recommendation is, councillors, that we adopt that monthly financial report for the period ended 31 August 2021. Someone have it moved by Councillor Rolfe, seconded Councillor Brimblecombe. All in favour? Against? Thank you, councillors. Carried. Thank you, Vicky. Councillors, that next agenda item is moving along to General Manager Michelle Webster's hand under Customer and Commercial Services, the Christmas New Year office closure. I'll let you lead us off. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and good morning, Mayor and councillors. This report before you, councillor, you'll be aware that over a number of years now we've actually closed down between the Christmas and New Year period. This is in line with other businesses within the region as well as other levels of government. Generally it's fairly common practice nowadays, and so hence the report before you today to consider again the close down for the 21-22 Christmas New Year period. I will make note in regards to the report that previously in regards to Tieri Town Centre office, transaction centre office, that generally we've aligned with the mine close down, which is generally only the statutory holidays. However, we are proposing to take the approach for this close down period to align with the rest of the council officers in regards to that full period of time. We've also consulted with the bank branch, the Capricornian Bank, in regards to their branches as well, and it's no objection from the branch as well. So what we're proposing, councillors, is that we close all administration buildings and libraries for the period from 12 p.m. on Friday the 24th of December up to and including Monday the 3rd of January 2022. So reopening on Tuesday the 4th of January 2022. Obviously, we'll have the appropriate public notice and telephone answering services to be provided during that time, and ensuring that residents and customers have an avenue for any emergent matters to be attended. We also considered in putting forward the report to you, councillors, that the dates in regards to the issue of rate notices and order notices, which shouldn't impact upon the closure period, where those discount periods should fall well before that period of time. So we would propose a recommendation to you. Happy to answer any questions.
Councillors, any questions? I don't think we've even thought about Christmas Day this year, but anyhow, it's on a Saturday. We've just been there. Sorry? 99 days. Thank you very much. That's a little bit of an insight into Natalie Curtis. There you go. Thank you, Councillor Rolfe.
Mr Mayor, the last year, the Capricornian Bank, the closure of the office was a bit of a, oh dear, it's closed, but it didn't seem to, I mean, people can come to Emerald if they have to, yeah, so, and you can always get your, they found that the businesses in Springshaw, because they do Christmas in the street and that sort of thing and needed funds, they do it before they close, so it worked out quite well. It's, so if Capella's a bit concerned, it does work out. Be organised. Yeah, be organised, that's right, thank you.
All right. Okay, councillors, well, that recommendation is there that obviously that we close all administration buildings and libraries for the period from Friday 24 December and up to and including Monday the 3rd of January 2022, reopening on Tuesday 4th. Someone happy to move that? Moved by Councillor Curtis, seconded Councillor Moriarty. All in favour? Against? Thank you, councillors. Carried. Thank you, everyone. Councillors, moving along again to infrastructure and utilities. 11.4.1, this is in relation to Comet Street Road Reserve in Ralston. Acting General Manager, do you want to lead us off?
If I could, Mr Mayor, the General Manager has advised me that new information has come to hand this morning from the applicant, and request the council permission to defer this report to the following meeting.
So we just want to defer it? Just lie on the table, yep. Yeah, councillor, I think most councillors would have been aware this morning that certainly the parties in relation to this particular matter had planned to be here for the agenda item today, and had a discussion with the manager of infrastructure, and I think it's appropriate. We always want any input we can have to make sure that when we're considering these things, they get the best possible consideration. So if councillors are happy that this matter lays on the table until that is...
Procedural motion for
that effect? Just a procedural motion, yep. Moved by Councillor Rolfe, that the matter lay on the table until next meeting. Oh, yep, thank you. Thank you. Well, that got you out of the report. Councillors, I'm just mindful that our next sessions are, a closed sessions item, they'll actually move along for some considerable period of time. So I just think if it at all possible, we might adjourn our meeting now and probably, given that we have a little bit of time, if we adjourn our meeting now and we'll go down to our...
We'll have to check to see if they're ready, Mr Mayor.
Yeah, well, I think what we'll do is, I guess, to keep our meeting in order, the closed session matters are what we're going to consider next, and they go for a considerable period of time.
There's another
We do have
report,
one,
there's
11.5,
council meeting dates.
Mr Mayor.
Right, which I've just overlooked. Right, thank you very much, team. I know there was people were looking at me rather funny, so 11.5 is under the Chief Executive Officer's hand, which is the council meeting dates for 2022, which is very important. So, Mr CEO, fire away.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, the report provides for notification of council's intended meeting dates for the calendar year 2022 in line with requirements of the local government regulation, which we must report the intended meeting dates in advance, and the council can change those dates at any time by resolution, and we just give due notice on our website of that change. In line with the dates selected by council at the statutory meeting last year following the election, we've proposed to remain with the second and fourth Wednesday of each month, with the exception of June, which was conflicts with the Australian Local Government Association meeting in Canberra, which council normally has representation at. So I recommend that council consider the dates proposed for the calendar year 2022, with the first meeting being in Friday the 28th of January, following Christmas hiatus.
Right, thank you, Mr CEO. Now, with your indulgence, Mr CEO, now, Marnie, these dates you've considered all sorts of public holidays and et cetera, and long weekends, so they've all been considered in these dates?
I have, Mr Mayor. The only, I don't know if it's not a concern of mine, but the January date is the day before Australia Day in 2023. I'm just not, like, it falls in the normal sequence, the cycle, so I don't know if that'll be a concern for people.
Oh, I see, the last date. Yeah, I see what you mean, yeah, okay.
Unless something else pops up in the meantime.
All right, and as the CEO just said, I mean, if there was some reason to do that, we could change it at the appropriate time.
Yep.
Okay. All right, councillors, any other queries on those dates? It's always very foreboding when we're always talking about the dates for next year, and you're probably thinking that it will be good to get this year over with, but that's when they fall. And obviously our 3 regional council meetings will be retained in February, May and October. Is everyone happy with those? The regions are happy with them, so I think in the right spot. Okay.
I'm pleased, we used to have 2 in December once, and I'm pleased we have dropped that back to just 1 in December. I think that's sufficient for December.
All right, thank you. All right, councillors, well, look, I think they are what they are there, and I mean, unless something substantive comes up, I don't believe we changed too many dates, and Marnie's made the allowances there for the ALGA, I suppose, conference on the basis that other things don't interfere with those dates, or in fact the whole purpose of being able to travel anywhere. So we'll obviously retain that for the time being. So, councillors, that recommendation is there that we adopt those. Is someone happy to move them? Moved by Councillor Moriarty, second Councillor Brimblecombe. All in favour? Against? Thank you, councillors. Now, is there any other secret agenda items here that I've missed? That is it. Well, look, councillors, we can adjourn, so we might adjourn the meeting at 10:15. We might head down to the gallery. I mean, we might be able to actually have a look around, give you a little bit of time, and then we'll resume here again at 11, I think is the process. And we'll deal with our closed session items then, so those officers are aware that we'll be back in the room then for that. And I think there's about, a good hour with those 3 particular closed session items, and they're closed for a number of reasons. We'll deal with those when we get back up from our break and our time in the gallery this morning. So councillors will adjourn the meeting at 10:14 and we'll be back here at 11. Thank you. with your microphones on at 10:58, so we'll resume our meeting. Councillors, and to our live streamers particularly, I apologise for the inconvenience, but we are actually going to deal with some closed sessions items now. We have three closed session items, so in approximately an hour. So to our live streamers, you'll acknowledge that the council meeting will be closed and includes the live stream for the next hour, provided that's what council resolves to do, and then we'll come back into our open session to actually record our resolutions in relation to those items. So can someone move that we go into closed session, please, councillors? Moved by Councillor Moriarty, second Councillor Carpenter. All in favour? Against? Thank you, councillors. Carried. rest of them go? They probably got the rest of that morning tea, Charlie.
I get chocolate cake.
Right, I think we're back live streaming now, so back on channel. Welcome back to our live streamers. Our meeting is now open again. All right, as I said, our live streamers have joined us back again. Well, our meeting is now open again. Councillors, now in terms of those items that were considered for different reasons in closed session, we deal with the first one, which was the endorsement of the Major Planning Scheme Amendment Floodplain Management. And obviously the recommendation is obviously to amend our flood hazard assessment study and endorse the progress of the revised draft. And that's to go to review, so there's a lot of public, I guess, engagement that this will allow our team to do prior to us bringing this back, and authorising the CEO to do all the matters specified as is in the statutory guidelines for making the major amendment and amending the planning scheme. Apologies. Someone happy to move that, please? Moved by Councillor Moriarty, second by Councillor Brimblecombe. All in favour? Against? Thank you, councillors. Carried. Councillors, we then considered a number of applications, rating applications for purposes of discount or removal. So the recommendation here is that in accordance with Section 93(3) of the Local Government Act, Sections 120, 121, 122 and the relevant subsections, and Section 2.2 of the Revenue Statement, which is passed with your budget, to approve, there's 5 parts there, to approve a rebate of 100%, in respect of assessment number 25128, effective 1 January, and to approve an increase in the rebate of general rates from 50 to 100% effective from 1 January in respect of assessment 25221, and to allow this concession to apply for the duration of the use of the property as part of a not-for-profit. 3 was to not approve a rebate of a general rate in respect of assessment number 29316. 4 was to not approve a rebate in respect of assessments. There's a number of them there: 2683, 2837, 423, 1181, 2895, 891, 1714, 2725, 2430, 2448, 2447, 16165, 2864, 15412 and 2627. And the 5th one there, to not approve a rebate of a general rate levied in respect of assessment number 1354. So a number of them there, and we've checked off those assessment numbers. Is someone happy to move those? Moved by Councillor Cypher, seconded Councillor Carpenter. All in favour? Against? Thank you, councillors. Carried. And councillors, importantly, in respect of the appointment of a Chief Executive Officer for the Central Highlands Regional Council, the recommendation is there that we appoint Sharon Houlihan as Chief Executive Officer under the terms of the contract offered. Would someone like to move that, please? Moved by Councillor Rolfe, seconded Councillor Moriarty. All in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. And to our executive leadership team and our acting CEO, thank you very much. This has been, I guess, business as usual because you're consummate professionals at your jobs, but obviously the change to a new CEO and certainly having Michael here in the interim has been certainly a bit of a unique experience for some, probably something that's happened before for many of the others, but at the end of the day it is quite a momentous occasion for our region. It doesn't happen often, and we're really, as our councillors expressed, a great confidence in the candidate that's been chosen, and looking forward not just for our organisation but for the people of the Central Highlands. So we certainly are very excited about a new CEO coming to our place. All right, thank you everyone. Councillors, the rest of our agenda items now relate back to communities. In the first instance is an update on the council of hours of operation of the resource recovery facilities. And I think Acting General Manager Lisa, you can lead this off. Have we got, and Kirsten is here as well. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The purpose of this report is to provide an update on the amendments to the operational hours at Council's resource recovery facilities following the tabling of Madeline Tasker's petition on the 14th of April 2021. I'll hand over to Manager Kirsten Byrne to discuss the updated hours.
Lovely, thank you, Lisa. Through you, Mr Mayor. This information report was committed to Council following the survey that was undertaken after the petition tabled by Madeline Tasker from Capella residents in relation to the operating hours of that facility. Following that discussion at Council in April this year, we undertook a survey with the community to understand their feedback on the operating hours of our resource recovery facilities. It was a low take-up on the survey, but there was some really great feedback received from the residents in relation to the hours of operation, and that's subsequently resulted in a bit of a comms plan from our communications team in relation to setting expectations and managing those expectations with the community. So this update is just to provide some information about the changes in hours at Capella, Springshire, Rollston, Dringa, Bluff and Sapphire Rubyville. So of note, Table 1 on page 139 of the report demonstrates the expansion of hours at those facilities. We do note that this is only a one-year solution because we do have funding for these positions for that 12-month period. So from August 2023, we will have to do some work before those two positions are vacated about understanding those hours of operation. This will coincide with the work that's been done currently on the draft waste strategy, of which I've got a meeting with our consultants next week on Monday to go through the finer details about that before we bring it back to Council later this calendar year. Just in terms of the budgeting, which is important to note, these two positions amount to approximately $170,000 for the year period, which includes the onboarding and then the roster loading for those roles. And so the total waste budget for waste management within Council is 7.6 million. So it does represent a chunk of money essentially. So we have increased those operating hours as much as we can across the board in line with the feedback. So if you've got any questions, don't hesitate to ask.
Right, Councillor Simon. Yep.
I just want to say a big thank you. You know, it's really important to be able to access the tip sites during an afternoon period. So, and on behalf of the Capella community, they are very grateful, really appreciate the effort. They do understand the rostering challenge that you would have had and the budget implication, but this is a true example of the power of the people, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Simon. I think it is needs to be acknowledged that we always said in our conversations that as the hours and certainly the changes to our waste strategy morphed over the period of time from the state government changes, that you know, obviously there was going to be a need for review, and I think it's testimony to the great conversations that we can have with our communities, and there are a number of them that have had these conversations. What Councillor Cyphers was saying was, you know, that very, very mature conversation was had at Capella about, you know, things that didn't suit and the opportunities, and the really, really frank discussion about cost, and our communities understand that. They know what value is, and they want to see us get it right. So it was really great that the organisation responded very well, and obviously as a council we'll have to keep a very, I guess you'd say, strategic eye over what we choose to do in the future, and it will be about probably some really strong advocacy to make sure that you know, those costs of waste, it's a very big budget. 7.6 million is quite considerable in the context of our whole operation, but it is something that we know through our community satisfaction surveys that it is important to people, and getting it right and reviewing it and having those sensible conversations. So I'm certainly cognizant of the work that obviously the Capella community did to get together and say, you know, it didn't quite fit us, and I think it was really impressive the way our organisation responded to that and said, right, oh, well, let's work through that. So let's hope we've got a good solution there. Councillor Moriarty?
Oh, good. Thank you very much. I just wanted to say thank you that there was that you allocated a morning there for Bluff as well. Yeah, just looking at the feedback there, that there was 12 for mornings and 10 for afternoons, so out of that breakdown. So I know that it probably would have been good to have a Wednesday morning there, but at least we've got some afternoons and got a morning, so that's really good. And again, I just wanted to definitely say congratulations and thank you, I think, to the Capella community and I think that the CRG for providing that opportunity for the community to come along and meet with councillors, and then the great advice that the councillors gave, particularly Councillor Cypher, because it really opened a door for us to find a way forward as well, because I know other communities have, tried their best, but Capella led the way there. Thank you very much to everyone involved for enabling this, so thank you.
Right, thanks, Councillor Moriarty. Is there any other queries on those times? Everyone happy with that? All right. Councillors, well, I think the recommendation is that we receive the report regarding the proposed changes to the Resource Recovery Centre operating hours at those locations effective from Saturday 18 September. Someone happy to move that? Moved by Councillor Cypher, second Councillor Brimelkamp. All in favour? Against? Thank you, councillors. Carried. Thank you very much, Kirsten. Thank you, Lisa. The next item comes under Customer and Commercial Services. There's a couple of record of proceedings that we're now calling our community consultation, I suppose, recognition of what we were calling minutes previously. These are record of proceedings. I'll hand over to General Manager Michelle to lead us through these.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, the first report is a record of proceedings of the community consultation held at Rolleston, Top Rain and Carnarvon Gorge, held on the 31st of August 2021. You will see there, I'll take the report as read, that there were 8 action items that have been entered into our customer request management system to be progressed and actioned upon. And as I wasn't present, I won't comment, and I'll just take the report as read.
Thanks, councillors, and I shall refrain from commenting too much because I was not present too, and I thank Deputy Christine and other councillors for obviously being present at those community consultation areas. So, councillors, questions, comments on the record of the CRMs or any other comments to make? There you go. Deputy Christine, yep.
Thank you. Rolleston consultation, while a small number of community members was, they're very strongly community, and it ended up being a really good meeting. I think that the process of council having to have meetings in public places probably stopped some of maybe the Top Rain, because we usually have a meeting on a property, but that cannot happen at the moment in the climate that we're in. So it was quite good, and the information provided was by all the staff and officers was well received, so it's a good meeting. Thanks.
All right, so councillors, that's Rolleston. The recommendation is there that we receive those recorded proceedings. Is someone happy to move those? Moved by Councillor Brimelkamp, second to Councillor Carpenter. All in favour? Against? Thank you, councillors. And I guess the next record of proceedings extended from that community consultation road trip, which took you to the Acadia Valley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, records of proceedings for consultation at Acadia Valley, also on the 31st of August. And councillors will see there are 5 actions that have been recorded into our customer request management system. Again, I wasn't present at that consultation, so I'll take the report as read and hand over to the councillors. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Michelle. And councillors, you may have heard, those of you that listened to the rural report this morning, there was a concern from Arcadia Valley regarding Parthenium, or spread of Parthenium with travelling stock. I don't know whether it was raised at this meeting, so it has extended from that, and there were some comments this morning, and they did refer to the fact that it actually asked, they actually spoke to Blackwall Tambo, and I suspect, and who didn't really know much about weeds, but made some general comments about it. But I know that our organisation has authorised through Lisa's area the conversation might happen with our rangers in respect of activities in that respect. So we will provide the ABC with some comment, I think, to follow up from that. But certainly that was just something that followed on, I think, from that discussion. So, councillors, with it. Oh, sorry, go, councillor.
So, just further to that, Mayor, our Rangers Services, Brett Keys, advised, and this is in the minutes, Arcadia Valley is a secondary stock route. Council can approve permits for those secondary roads. Drovers are permitted to move up to 10 kilometres per day. Due to legislation, we cannot restrict use of the stock route. If stock is unfit to travel, the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries will assess and liaise with the drover. So that was the response, and that can only be the response from a legislative point of view. Thanks.
All right, I think the other conversation piece that was added to that this morning was from the AgForce representative, Maria, I can't think of her name, and she, I guess, was advocating for the very fact that a lot of these devolved responsibilities on stock routes to local governments made it very, very hard in terms of cost. So she was certainly mindful of that. I'm not suggesting for one moment this is a matter of cost here, but certainly responsibility and cost. She was certainly highlighting the fact that there's not a lot of extra, whether that's weed control, supplicant to having obviously livestock travelling through, and we are, as we've been told, quite a popular region to travel livestock through. And if we do get, I think the comment was made that if we do get a run of good seasons, you will start to see the residue of that being weeds in areas where cattle have obviously worked stock routes over, or camping areas for drovers and what have you. So Councillor Mayor Andrew Martin made some pretty good comments about that when we do, hopefully, fingers crossed, that we get some good seasons. So, all right, councillors, that recommendation is there, including those CRMs there is included in there, that we received those record of proceedings. Someone have to move those. Moved by Councillor Carpenter, second Councillor Burns. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you, everyone. Councillors, we're just about run out of things to do in respect of this agenda. Councillors, is there any general business that you'd like to raise? No, all good. There are no late agenda items, is there, Mr.
No, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
I just have an item, a general bit, just for information to council. I will distribute an email that I received from Santos GLNG regarding a CRG meeting in the Arcadia Valley, where it was intimated by Santos, or an employee of Santos, that council had not spent all their contribution on the Mulcahy's Road. And I've since clarified that with Santos that was not a statement, in fact. So they have offered a formal apology for that misinformation.
Okay.
And I'll distribute that.
All right. All right, thank you. And councillors, I suppose it, just to note that we have received a letter from DAF in respect of the property, the former QATC site. So councillors will also receive some correspondence in relation to that at some point. Just advising of certainly the progress going forward from now. All right. No other general business, councillors? All right. There being no further business, I'll declare the meeting closed at 12:01 p.m. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, executive leadership team, and all of our officers today.